once they do get onto the field, like these are the things that we had kind of hoped would be answered in spring, but they didn't get spring. So now you're going to have to really utilize the time you have in the fall. The first guy that Ed Orgeron talked about was Andre Anthony. And here's what Ed Orgeron said about the senior defensive end.
I think the 4-3 fits him better than the 3-4. He was kind of out of whack in the 3-4. And now he's got his hand on the ground. He's smart. He's aggressive. He gets off the ball. He's one of the guys during this break here has been having some tremendous workouts, sends a state back, been a leader for us. He's kind of refueled by the 4-3 and giving him a chance that he can actually play. I think it's a natural position at left end. I know he's going to play for us, perhaps start.
What's so interesting to me about Andre Anthony is when you think back to when he signed as a 4-star defensive end in 2016, he was one of the top prospects at that position in the country. He was the number 203 overall recruit nationally in the country, athletic off the edge when he was coming out of Edna Carr. And when you think about how LSU had recruited that position with guys like Montgomery and Mingo and Daniil Hunter and Arden Key, like he was supposed to be next. Andre Anthony was in that mold at 6'3", 215 to be next. And it just hasn't materialized for him. And he's one of the guys that every year, he and Ray Thornton that we talk about, all right, is this the year that those guys finally pop? And athletically, it's there, but maybe it's the switch to the 3-4, whatever. And that coincides, obviously, with Dave Aranda coming in when he signed in 2016. Maybe that was just something that didn't suit him well. But entering his senior year, Andre Anthony has played in 22 games and made 23 tackles. Let me say that again. 4-star defensive end, signee, top 200 player in the country, athletic off the edge, was built and recruited in the mold of Mingo and Hunter and Montgomery and Key and all those guys. And through his time on campus so far, he's played in 22 games and made 23 tackles. I'm not dogging the kid, but there's been he just hasn't maximized whatever opportunity he's had. So I am really curious if the switch to a 4-3 and putting Anthony on the edge with his hand in the dirt as opposed to standing up as an outside linebacker is going to benefit him. LSU as a team had 40 sacks a year ago. In 2019, they had 40 sacks. They returned just 17 and a half of those. I mean, guys like Caleb Von Chasson and Patrick Queen and Michael Divinity and guys that were really good for you at rushing the passer, even Grant Delpit from his safety spot, they're gone. You have a position that is wide open at defensive end. LSU is stacked at tackle. They got depth at linebacker. They're always good at corner with Stevens coming back and Todd Harris coming off of injury. They've got depth at safety. What they don't have is anybody who is proven as a defensive end. Maybe this is the year for Andre Anthony. And Ed Orgeron wasn't asked about Anthony. He brought up his name, which is always encouraging because Ed typically is the kind of coach who will tell you without telling you. He'll bring up guys routinely. Before last year, he routinely brought up a guy like Glenn Logan, who ended up starting for LSU. At the start of the season last year, got injured against Texas. But Ed will tell you, and I feel like maybe he's leaning a bit on Andre Anthony. Now, the other guy he talked about is Marcel Brooks. And you cannot speak to anybody at LSU without them bringing up Marcel Brooks. I get asked a lot, and when I do different interviews and different stations or whatever, social media, people say, hey, who's going to be the breakout guy in 2020? And I always give the same answer. On offense, it's Trey Palmer, and on defense, it's Marcel Brooks. Here's Ed Orgeron talking about Brooks.
We have to put him on the field. The guy's a force on the field. He's fast. He can make plays. He's very aggressive. We're going to put him as stack linebacker right now. He's learning it right now. He's doing very well. He's up to 210 pounds. This guy's one of the fastest players on our field and plays defense the way it ought to play. I think he's going to have an excellent year.
So, stack linebacker instead of defensive end. Now, he doesn't look like a defensive end, but he's kind of that tweener, right? He doesn't look like a 6'4", 240-pound defensive end, 250-pound defensive end, but he also doesn't look like a guy that's big enough to stand up and make plays in the middle of an SEC defense. Ed Orgeron said there he's up to 210 pounds. You know who I think of when I look at Marcel Brooks, just physically who I think of? Remember when LSU had that run with Taj Jones and Lamine Barrow at linebacker? Taj Jones was listed at 6'2", 205. Lamine Barrow, I think they were generous, but they had him listed at 6'2", 232. I think he put on weight maybe late in his career. But both of those guys were thin, smaller linebackers who played in John Chavis's 4-3, and Marcel Brooks may look a lot like that. It is worth noting LSU's also had guys like Debo Jones and Duke Riley, and maybe, speaking of Andre Anthony, maybe he's the guy like Debo and Duke Riley who just bided their time and as a senior exploded. The difference is Andre Anthony was a highly thought of signee. Debo and Duke were last in their class that waited their time as special teams players and then popped when they had their chance. Marcel Brooks is a guy as a sophomore that everyone is gushing about, and they're expecting him to have a big-time year for this defense. Wonder if he's going to wear 9 again. Personally, I think LSU should never issue 9 again, but number is a number. And then the other is Jabril Cox. Of course, there's a ton of interest and excitement about Jabril Cox because he's the grad transfer coming in from North Dakota State. 6'3", 233. Here's what Ed Orgeron said about Jabril Cox.
Excited to see what he's going to come in and do. He's a senior. He's a big guy, 6'3", 233. He can run. And the next guy I'm excited to see is Josh White. Josh was one of the best linebackers in the country, in our opinion, out of Houston, Texas, could be key and diagnosed very fast. So obviously when we come back, whenever we get our guys back, get these guys ready, get them in shape, is going to be a priority.
Jabril Cox, and then he mentioned Josh White, but Cox is one of those guys coming in from North Dakota State, as we know. Here's Jabril Cox's statistics. I don't want to bore you, but just listen to how consistent this young man was in 3 years. In 2017, 75 tackles, 13 for loss, 4.5 sacks. That was as a freshman. 2018 as a sophomore, 91 tackles, 9.5 for loss, 4 sacks. Then as a junior, 92 tackles, 9.5 for loss, 5.5 sacks. So his tackles went 75, 91, 92. Tackles for loss went 13, 9.5, 9.5. And his sacks, 4.5, 4, 5.5. 3 years at the collegiate level, 3 years of super consistent ball. LSU needs him to be Jacob Phillips. LSU needs him to stand in the middle of the defense and make 100 tackles this year. If he does that, I think LSU's defense is going to absolutely soar this year. I know a lot of people are looking at everything LSU lost, and I understand that completely because they lost a ton. All-Americans, 100-tackle guys, first-round draft picks, edge rushers, linebackers, safeties. But boy, they got a lot of talent there. And the 3 guys we mentioned may be a gigantic part to LSU reclaiming their status among the nation's elite defensively.